Welcome back to the show, everybody. We got a good one for you today. Remember, there's two different kinds of regulators we need to be paying attention to and having a conversation about. One of which we've been having is the market regulator. And there's another one. We're going to talk about that again today. And Blake Paulson will be taking the place of Brian Brooks, who's stepping down from the OCC. We're going to talk a little bit about his previous experience and where will Brian Brooks land. We got some good thoughts on that one. And the Dodd-Frank Act, what's it got to do with the Internet of Value? And speaking of the Internet of Value, the new SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, as cited by the new administration, is describing how the XRP ledger works. What in the world is going on here? Let's roll that beautiful intro.
This is Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Subscribe for new content notifications. Now, here's Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow me on Twitter at BackupBradley above at the top of the screen and everything that we're talking about here today. Let's go ahead and get started with this piece of news right here from Cryptic Poet. The Bank of Kyber, I'm going to call it, goes live with Ripple integrated Temenos. Temenos and Ripple have been working together since at least May of 2016, and it kicks off today, and it's a successful live launch with Temenos Transact, the next generation of core banking, Temenos Infinity, digital banking platform, financial crime mitigation, analytics. There you have it. Pakistan's running wild with the Ripple software, and it's exciting, right? I mean, remember, it's not XRP, but you know what? It's got to come in stages the way it happens. It's got to be using the software and the suite of products before you can complement it with the digital asset. Now let's get on to this right here. This is Brian Brooks to step down, Blake Paulson to become acting comptroller of currency. And right here, I wanted to come down here and just not going to read the whole letter to you, but just to look at this. Mr. Paulson is a career bank examiner and has served as chief operating officer since June of 2020 in this role. Mr. Paulson oversaw the OCC bank supervision and OCC management operations, as well as the staff are responsible for systemic risk identification support and specialty supervision and supervision system and analytical support. Now, this is an important thing to note because, you know, the reality here is that when I hear systemic risk identification support and specialty supervision, it really always takes me back to the Dodd-Frank Act that I've told you about that is tied to the U.S. Treasury about having the ability to designate certain financial market utilities systemically important. So this is something to note, and this is not the first time we've heard this verbiage in this space about these kinds of things, and we're going to continue that in just a second here. OCC released today finalized rule requiring large banks to provide fair access to bank services, capital, and credit, which is very good. And when we look down here, the rule implements language included by Title III of Dodd-Frank, Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010, which charged the OCC with assuring the safety, soundness, and compliance and with laws, regulation, fair access to financial services, and fair treatment of customers by the institutions and other persons subject to its jurisdiction. Again, the Dodd-Frank Act also authorizes counsel to designate financial market utilities. Now, obviously, they're talking about consumer protections and things of that nature, but let me just read a little further here so you understand the other things that are being said in here. So, if the counsel determines that a failure or disruption of the functioning FMU, financial market utility, could create, increase, or risk significant liquidity or credit problems spreading among financial institutions or markets and thereby threaten the stability of the U.S. financial system. Designated financial market utilities will become subject to the heightened prudential supervisory provisions of Title VIII. We were talking about Title III in the other section of the Dodd-Frank, but the reality is these things overlap, and these things are all coming from this foundation of the Dodd-Frank Act, because the last crisis we were in, we heard yesterday Sandy O'Connor, who is now at Ripple, describe how AIG, Lehman Brothers, and Bear Stearns all went down because they truly were not banks, so they didn't get bailed out. And there was a lot of pain that was suffered and endured to absorb all of those failures. The too big to fails wasn't because they were too big to fail, it's because they weren't banks. And now we see this move to really, you want to say deregulate, but it's not deregulate, right? But it's decentralize and allow this level playing field to encompass all these particular entities, whether it be crypto exchanges or banks. If you're performing a banking activity, you're going to be treated as a bank under the purview of the OCC. So now the question remains, now that we know that Brian Brooks is leaving, where will he end up? James Rule XRP decided to Photoshop Brian in with the leadership team of Ripple. It would be fantastic to see him land at Ripple. You know, one of the things I started to speculate on this, and I was like, wow, where would be like a really cool place? Hey, you never know. The SEC created a brand new division for digital assets. I believe firmly that's why we have a lawsuit with Ripple and XRP being a unregistered security or not. And I believe that that legal precedent will lead to a new framework that can be adopted to that new SEC division. And it will serve as its own form of a Howey test to look at digital assets and digital asset companies and how they launch these tokens going forward in the future. And then they would have a Howey test for the traditional side of the SEC, and then you'd have a Ripple test, let's call it, for when we get through this court decision and launch this new SEC division in a real big way. And who knows, maybe Brian Brooks ends up somewhere like that. Maybe he leaves this sector altogether. We don't know. But I hope he doesn't, because his perspectives have been absolutely paramount in this space, no doubt about it, and timely, I would say. You know, but maybe he ends up somewhere like Backed. I know Big Skinny threw that one at me, and I was like, wow, man, you know, that would be a great land too. I mean, Backed being owned by Intercontinental Exchange, which is really ICE, the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange. I don't know where he lands. I just hope he remains in the space. Now, moving on here, we want to switch the conversation to stable coins and digital currencies from the bank's point of view here. This is the IMF. It says it might be digital, but will it really be currency? While central banks examine the case for developing digital currency, many might not be allowed to do so by their own laws. Now, it breaks down, and I'm not going to open the article because it just breaks down some graphs that this amount of countries, a percent of countries are this far along, and this amount of countries are this far along. Here's what the reality is. The reality is we've identified the top-down trend. Things happened on an international level, from the G7 to the G20. Sandy O'Connor confirmed it because she's been a part of those panels for decades. And that's exactly what happens is the countries come together and they develop a framework internationally. And that's why you have these moments where you see this bank is announcing a pilot test for a digital currency, and this country over here is launching a digital yuan, and this country over here is getting ready to launch the sand dollar. And how do you think all that just seems to happen around the same time? You think they're all just guessing that I think that China will have it first, so I should probably do it next? That's not how this gets done, right? So, you know, the reality is that they all work on an international level. They have goals for the year that they all want to meet, and then they release framework, and they try to release it where it's loose enough that they could structure something to it, but still leave the room for all the respective nations to drill down on that framework with inside their borders. So when I look at this, I think, boy, they can really make a post sound like it's further away than it actually is. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'll make the video about it. But the bigger notion here about this is the same thing that we're getting with this narrative from the Fed. And it says here from XRP Crypto, well, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said the U.S. is going slow on central bank digital currencies, considering the risks they may pose to the U.S. dollar's dominance. Well, that's certainly a factor. There's no question about that part. But what I would say here is that this is also a bit of misdirection in my mind when I see this, because it's the same thing from the IMF. There have been years of study here. They are well aware of what the spillovers and spillbacks and fallbacks and all this need to be, and what they could be, and what the shocks to the system could be, and the implications of all of that. And what I would just offer here to note is that, you know, there's a couple things to note here. One is the Fed is not an innovator. So there's going to be a public-private relationship, I would say. So we don't have to worry about them taking years to get this done, because there's perfect private stable coins out here like the USDC that could serve as a digital dollar, and they could go on and in fact take years before they personally release a Fed coin. So that's neither here nor there in my mind. It doesn't hold up where we need to go. But when it comes to the Fed and the IMF and what they're saying here, what they're really acknowledging here to me is they're acknowledging here is the on and off ramps to the new financial system, the Internet of Value. And this is a big deal, because if you don't have the on and off ramps, it don't matter how nice the highway is. If I can't get on it or get off of it, I don't even want to ride on it. So to me, I think there's, like I said, there's a few things here, but the main thing for me is that you're seeing the IMF and the Federal Reserve address these issues because they know that they're relevant. They try to do so in the most tampered down way, but nevertheless, these issues are extremely relevant. Just like right here, they try to stamp it down one more time. He says, Powell says the Fed is studying risk of stable coins. It's a very high priority. Yeah. And I bet we end up again with a public-private relationship, because it's such a high priority. They know they can't make one fast enough. So here we go. Let's get into this, because this one comes from Mickey B. Fresh. Shout out to you, my friend. And it says, new SEC chair, Gary Gensler, talking about the Internet of Value. And it sounds like he spent some time listening to the professors, Just Moon and Joel Katz, which is David Schwartz and Stephen Thomas, about Interledger, echoing the near identical narrative about the Internet of Value. It's a presentation from 2019 MIT Sloan video, courtesy of David Hamilton. Shout out to you, David, and Mickey B. Fresh. Let's listen to this, because this is quite an interesting exchange. And then we're going to look at some of these comments down here, and then we're going to look at a diagram that I've laid out as well to tie all of this in here. So let's go ahead and check this out.
And then something called the Internet of Value. Moving around on the internet, packets of data representing value, the talk as well. And then something called the Internet of Value. Moving around on the internet, packets of data representing value, the same way we move packets of data around the internet since the early 1990s on the internet. And the internet is not an intranet. In the early 90s, we had CompuServe and other services that were intranets. And then the internet comes along, because great MIT work, World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, and so forth.
And by the way, Gary Gensler, MIT, of course.
Creating an internet. Will we get to a place where we have a true internet moving money around, packets of value, interoperable movement of value and micropayments?
Now, if we're going to have something like that, I've said this many times on this channel, and I've not been shy about it, and I'm not going to start being shy about it now. I believe everything runs on the ledger. I believe that is exactly what Ripple has meant from the very beginning when they coined the phrase, all the money. That's what it's about. Just like we have SMTP, which is the transportation, or which is the protocol, transfer protocol for email, right? So let's take a look at these things really quickly before we get too far ahead of ourselves. The Ripple project, in turn, is led by MIT professor Alex Pentland, managing director David Schreier, and chief technical officer Thomas Harjano. Dozens of researchers are expected to join over the next 6 months, according to Schreier. And it says here, let me go to this next little piece here. Distributed ledger technology can be used to represent the supranational digital liquidity of all assets, including real estate, stocks, and derivatives. Our mission is to build support for the global standard for the institutional digital asset custody, release the full spectrum of digital assets, and is designed to scale to trillions under management. That's the Internet of Value. Looking even further here, we see the plan below is a list of operational deliverables, ODs, that will help us to address the challenges. Establish an interledger exchange and registry. This will replicate many of the functions of an IX on the internet today. Initially, it will likely be run by the Tier 1 connector operators, and over time will scale out to have multiple geographical dispersed hubs. There it is. Mickey B working his magic, baby. Shout out to you. And that's the clip I had here, so I actually had it twice. But what I wanted to show you here is exactly this, is the internet and the internet of value. So I just put this diagram together just to give us, I'm a visual learner. I don't know about you, but I'm a visual learner, and this always helps me. So when I look at these different protocols that we currently have that make up the internet that you and I are using to communicate with one another right now, SMTP, as I said, is your simple mail transaction protocol to move emails. Well, now you'll be able to attach value inside of that email and move value through that protocol as well. All the file transfer protocol, same thing, and having the ability to now interoperable wise connect all of these different layers together and to begin to unlock the ability by doing so to move value through all of the different layers of protocol that we're currently using where applicable, right? So when I look at this, what I really see is a federated system, a multiple layered system, or multiple systems that are layered that work together as a single unit. That's what we're talking about here. And I don't think you get there without having what I talked about before, which is the difference between a market regulator and a prudential regulator, which is why I keep coming back to the U.S. Treasury and FSOC, mind you, and I keep coming back to the Financial Stability Oversight Council, which is a regulatory body connected to the U.S. Treasury. And that's why I keep coming back to the Dodd-Frank Act, which was written here to deem things financial market utilities that are systemically important to the financial system. Now, whether it goes that far for a designation or whether the protocol of value, which would be the XRP ledger, could potentially see a moment where it is deemed a public good. Oh, I'm not grasping at straws here. The internet that I just showed you and the layers of the internet that I just showed you have already been deemed a public good by the UN and the Human Rights Council. So the reality here for me is that if we're going to see this come to fruition, just like Gary Gensler, which looks to be the new chair for the SEC, says, we're going to need to see something either be deemed a financial market utility and systemically important, or we're going to need to see that protocol that can move value become a public good like the rest of the internet. That's going to do it for me. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe, leave a comment below, share with somebody you know, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And make sure you check out all the links in the description box and the comment section. By the way, I Trust Capital, IRAs, crypto IRAs, gold IRAs, silver IRAs. How about this one? It's the best IRAs on the planet. Make sure you check them out in the description comment box as well. And I'll catch all of you on the next one.